Hi everybody, it's Clarke Camper with the December edition of Wall Street in Washington. This month I'd like first to discuss legislative proposals to promote smaller company IPOs. Second, I'd like to talk about what I think has been missed in the analysis of the deficit reduction agreement. And third, I'd like to crystal ball it a little bit about what we can expect to see in 2012. First, in terms of IPOs, numerous studies have shown that one of the biggest impediments to smaller companies going public is indeed the full burden of federal regulation that's placed on the smallest of companies. Recently, legislation in both the House and the Senate has been introduced to attempt to address this issue. In the Senate, we had Senators Schumer and Toomey, a Democrat and Republican respectively, and in the House, we had Representatives Fincher and Carney, a Republican and Democrat respectively, introducing bills, they're identical bills, aimed to address this problem. Now, what's so special about these bills? Well, really two things. First is they're bipartisan, not just in terms of the sponsorship, as I mentioned, but also, frankly, in terms of the growing list of members in both the House and the Senate who are co-sponsoring these bills. There's a very strong groundswell of bipartisan support, and that obviously makes the chances of getting enacted into law far, far greater. Second, and I think, though, really in some ways even more interesting, is that these bills take an innovative approach. They take what we're calling an on-ramp approach so that smaller companies would have up to 5 years to have the federal requirements phased in on them. So again, it's kind of it's an evolution in terms of companies as they grow, and the panoply of regulation slowly being put onto them. What's nice about this is many of the previous legislative efforts in this area have talked about full exemptions from things like Sarbanes-Oxley 404B, the outside auditor requirement. What this would do actually, again, is to slowly phase in that requirement. So what you're doing, I think, under this on-ramp approach is better balancing the needs of small companies with the needs of investors. NYSE Euronext has been very active in these bills from the very beginning. Scott Cutler, for instance, our head of listings, was in Washington a couple weeks ago testifying before Senate Banking Committee on this bill, among some other capital formation topics. And again, you'll continue to see us push to enact these bills into law. Second, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I think has been missing in the recent analysis of the deficit reduction efforts. There's been a ton of coverage of the fact that the super committee failed spectacularly. You know, what does that mean? Well, it means that then $1.2 trillion in cuts are supposed to be phased in over 10 years. The cuts, as viewers probably know, are divided equally between defense and non-defense spending. What's really been missing, though, I think, is the timing of those cuts. When does the first round of those cuts go into being? Well, not for over a year, January 2nd, 2013. Why is that important? Well, it means that basically this issue is going to be revisited time and time again during the coming year, particularly in the run-up to the election, and probably after the election as well. So the partisan wrangling over this topic isn't going to be done. You're going to wonder, why am I hearing this again? I thought it was, we took care of that last year. That's not the case. And another point, too, is that no Congress can bind the hands of future Congresses. So not only will this agreement be revisited in 2012, future Congresses can take a look at it again. So again, that point, I think, has been missing in a lot of the analysis. Finally, I want to crystal ball it a little bit, and that point about partisan wrangling provides a good segue into what I think we can expect to see in 2012. First, we can expect to see continued and probably intensified partisan wrangling. I've spoken before about the fact that the old paradigm of consensus no longer exists. In other words, the parties do not actually attempt to seek consensus. In fact, there's a new paradigm of conflict. Parties, for their own reasons, really seek conflict. You can expect that to happen. The real surprise should be not over conflict, but when there's actually bipartisan agreement on something. Second, in terms of the president, we can expect, I believe, to see him continue to use banks and Wall Street as political targets. I know it's frustrating for people in those industries, but it is what it is. The president and his staff have decided that it makes good political sense for them to target these entities, and I firmly believe you'll see that throughout the election period. Finally, we will continue to see, I believe, in 2012, a slowdown in the time frame for implementing the Dodd-Frank derivatives rulemaking provisions. As we have discussed in previous editions of Wall Street in Washington, Chairman Gensler and fellow CFTC commissioners have faced a number of political and substantive challenges in implementing these rules. I would add a new, at least more intensely new piece, which is process. CFTC was recently sued for the first time in decades by several industry groups. They were sued about their position limits rule. That naturally has caused the CFTC to be extremely careful about its process, not only on rules that are in the pipeline, but actually, I believe, to some extent, going back and revisiting some of the process around rules that have already been finalized. So expect that to be another factor that causes the rulemaking process to be extended well into 2012 and maybe beyond. So with that, I want to end on at least a little more positive note and wish you and yours a very, very happy holiday. We'll see you next month on Wall Street and Washington.